So there I was, pinned down behind what used to be a luxury hovercar. With nothing but a half-charged plasma rifle and a candy wrapper I was seriously considering eating because it had been 3 days since my last ration pack, Captain Javik Dathul said, his 4 mandibles clicking together in what his species considered a wry smile. "Let me guess," interrupted Lieutenant Commander Thomas Wilson, leaning back in his chair with a beer in one hand. "You made a magnificent shot through impossible odds and saved the day?" The humans and aliens of the United Galactic Military Forces were gathered in the recreational lounge of the UGMF Indomitable, sharing war stories after a joint training exercise. The room hummed with conversations in dozens of languages, the universal translators working overtime as drinks flowed freely. "I wish," Javik rumbled, his purple-tinged exoskeleton gleaming under the soft lighting. "No, I crawled through 3 kilometers of waste drainage, avoided 6 enemy patrols, and then realized I'd been going the wrong direction the entire time." Laughter erupted around the table. Even Katal, the stoic Ardaxian communications specialist, let out a series of high-pitched clicks that passed for chuckling in her species. "That's nothing," said Lieutenant Olivia Jackson, the ship's tactical officer, setting down her whiskey. "During my second tour on Proxima Centauri 4, I had to escape a rebel camp using nothing but a toothbrush I'd sharpened into a shiv and a uniform I'd stolen from their laundry facility." "A toothbrush?" Katal's bioluminescent patches flickered in disbelief, her 4 eyes blinking asynchronously. "How primitive." "Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it," Jackson grinned. "Sometimes the old ways work best." Captain Dathul nodded appreciatively. "Resourcefulness is a trait all warriors must cultivate. During the 3rd Hysterium conflict, I once fashioned a communicator from the components of a food synthesizer and 3 personal hygiene devices." "Impressive," Wilson acknowledged, "though I'm not sure I'd want to put anything near my mouth that was previously part of an alien toilet." "It was not a toilet," Dathul protested, mandibles flaring in what might have been embarrassment. "It was a cellular decontamination unit." "So, a shower?" Wilson translated with a smirk. Their banter was interrupted as Commander Zokhan, a veteran Tarkasian warrior, approached their table. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with dense, charcoal-gray skin covered in natural armor plates and eyes that glowed like dying embers, Zokhan was an imposing figure even among his own kind. His species were renowned throughout the galaxy as fearsome warriors, having never lost a war in their 4,000-year recorded history until they encountered humans. The conversations dimmed as Zokhan pulled up a chair. He was a legend in the United Forces, a battle-hardened commander with over 200 successful campaigns under his belt. "Commander," Captain Dathul acknowledged with a respectful nod. "We were just exchanging war stories." "Indeed." Zokhan's voice was like gravel being crushed. "I overheard. The human was speaking of improvised weapons." "Just boring old survival training stuff." Jackson shrugged. "Nothing that would impress a Tarkasian war hero." Zokhan's facial plates shifted in what might have been a smile. "On the contrary, improvisation is the mark of a true warrior. Our training emphasizes resourcefulness as well, though perhaps not with dental equipment." The table chuckled, and Wilson signaled to a server for another round. "So, Commander," Wilson ventured as fresh drinks arrived, "any good stories from the front lines? Something to make our little adventures seem like vacation hollows?" Zokhan considered for a moment, taking a measured sip from a container of steaming liquid that smelled vaguely of cinnamon and motor oil. "Perhaps the siege of Dorvet Prime," he said finally. 3 solar cycles of continuous battle against the Krell horde. No reinforcements, limited supplies, and atmospheric conditions that corroded our equipment hourly." Jackson whistled appreciatively. 3 years under siege? How'd you manage food supplies?" "The Krell themselves became a sustainable food source after the first cycle," Zokhan stated matter-of-factly. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. "Well," Wilson cleared his throat, "that's practical." "It was necessity," Zokhan replied without emotion. "Their exoskeletons also provided materials for repairs to our defensive infrastructure." "Reduce, reuse, recycle," Jackson murmured into her drink. "Very environmentally conscious warfare." Katal's bioluminescent patches darkened in what might have been disgust or admiration. It was hard to tell with Ardaxians. "What about you humans?" Zokhan turned his ember-like gaze toward Wilson and Jackson. "Your species has a unique approach to warfare that has proven remarkably effective, if somewhat baffling to the rest of the galaxy." Wilson and Jackson exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them, that even the advanced universal translators couldn't decode. Well, Wilson began. I was part of the Mars colony uprising. Not our finest hour as a species, admittedly. Humans fighting humans. Internal conflict is often the most brutal, D'Thul observed. Your species seems particularly prone to it. That's because we're stubborn as hell, Jackson interjected. But it's also how we got good at fighting. We've had a lot of practice. On ourselves. A curious evolutionary strategy, Catal remarked, her translator failing to fully convey the mix of fascination and horror in her harmonic tones. Wilson shrugged. Not a strategy so much as a side effect of being human. Anyway, during the uprising, we were trapped in Olympus City with separatist forces controlling all the major infrastructure. Including life support, Jackson added. Yeah, that was the fun part, Wilson continued. They thought they could force our surrender by gradually reducing oxygen levels throughout the habitat domes. Zokan leaned forward slightly, his full attention engaged. A sound tactical approach. Would have been, Wilson agreed, except our commanding officer had this absolutely insane idea. Lieutenant Commander Zhao, brilliant tactician, possibly certifiable, suggested we could use the hydroponics bay to our advantage. The plants produced oxygen, Catal surmised. A logical countermeasure. No, Wilson laughed. We already had emergency oxygen reserves. Zhao had us hack into the environmental systems and pump in excess carbon dioxide from our reserves. D'Thul's mandibles clicked in confusion, but that would accelerate the oxygen depletion. Exactly, Wilson's eyes glinted. We made it worse on purpose. We had portable oxygen supplies prepared, but the separatists didn't. They thought we were just being stubborn, right up until they started passing out from hypoxia. We took back 3 habitat sectors without firing a shot. Zokan's glowing eyes narrowed. You would have rendered your own environment more hostile to force your enemy to surrender? It's called scorched earth, Jackson explained. Old human tactic. If you can't have it, nobody can. Though in this case, I guess it was more like scorched air. But you risked your own forces, D'Thul pointed out. Calculated risk, Wilson replied. We knew exactly how long our portable systems would last, and we made sure to wrap things up before then. Plus, humans can function surprisingly well in low-oxygen environments for short periods. We're pretty adaptable. Fascinating, Zokan rumbled, the tone of his voice shifting slightly. Your willingness to endanger yourselves is noteworthy. That's nothing, Jackson waved dismissively. At least Wilson's story involves actual military strategy. My first deployment was against the Hyperion Mining Consortium in the asteroid belt, corporate mercenaries with better gear than we had. I recall this conflict, Zokan said. A dispute over resource rights, was it not? On paper, sure, Jackson nodded. In reality, it was about them using indentured workers in conditions that would make your horror stories sound like luxury resort packages. She took a long sip of her whiskey before continuing. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and they controlled all the major transit routes between the asteroids. Conventional tactics would have gotten us slaughtered. So what did you do? Catal asked, her bioluminescence pulsing with anticipation. Jackson grinned. We intentionally depressurized our own ships. The aliens at the table stared at her in stunned silence. You deliberately exposed yourselves to vacuum? D'Thul finally managed, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. For short, controlled periods, Jackson clarified. See, their fancy mercenary ships had all these external sensors for detecting approaching vessels, heat signatures, weapon systems powering up. The works. But they weren't looking for a bunch of idiots in vacuum suits floating amongst the debris. Your bodies would have been detectable, Zokan countered. Not if we lowered our body temperatures to near hypothermic levels, Jackson replied with a wink. Standard vacuum suit training for special ops. Wilson snorted. I remember hearing about this. Didn't you guys call it Operation Popsicle? Unofficially, yes, Jackson admitted. Anyway, we essentially played dead, drifting right past their security perimeter. Once inside, we attached to their hulls, cut our way in at strategic points, and took control of 3 of their command vessels simultaneously. While recovering from hypothermia, Wilson added helpfully. The hot showers afterward were the best I've ever had, Jackson concluded with a nostalgic sigh. Zokan was silent for a long moment, his ember eyes flickering as he processed this information. Your species deliberately induces life-threatening conditions upon yourselves as a tactical advantage, he finally stated. Not quite a question. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds crazy, Wilson laughed. It is crazy, D'Thul asserted. Brilliantly so, but still fundamentally irrational. Sometimes irrational is exactly what you need to be, came a new voice. The group turned to see Commander Wayne Gwyn, the Indomitable's executive officer, standing behind them. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being unnervingly calm in crisis situations. Commander, they acknowledged, making room as she joined their table. I couldn't help overhearing, Nguyen said, declining a drink with a small wave. And I think you're giving our alien friends the wrong impression. We're not all suicidal lunatics. Speak for yourself, Jackson muttered into her glass. Nguyen shot her a look that could have melted titanium. What Lieutenant Jackson and Lieutenant Commander Wilson are failing to explain properly is that human tactics aren't about self-destruction. They're about understanding and accepting risk within calculated parameters. An important distinction, Zhou Khan acknowledged. Exactly, Nguyen continued. Take the Battle of Europa Station. I was a junior officer then, barely out of the academy. Oh, this is a good one, Wilson grinned, settling back in his chair. The consortium forces had taken control of Europa's orbital facilities, Nguyen explained. Critical infrastructure for the outer colonies. They expected a frontal assault. It's what any rational military force would do. Let me guess, Dithul interjected. You did something irrational instead. We did something unexpected, Nguyen corrected with a thin smile. We launched a full-scale attack exactly as they anticipated. A textbook assault with all the proper formations and protocols. Zhou Khan nodded approvingly. A direct approach can sometimes be the most effective. Oh, that wasn't the plan, Nguyen clarified. That was the distraction. While they were focused on repelling our main force, a small team of engineers modified 4 automated cargo shuttles, packed them with industrial mining explosives, and programmed them to crash directly into Europa's ice surface. The alien officer stared at her. You bombed the moon they were orbiting? Katal's translator seemed to glitch momentarily as she tried to process this. Not to destroy it, Nguyen said, as if this should be obvious. Just enough to create a massive plume of ice and debris that would temporarily disrupt their orbital paths and sensor capabilities. The debris field would have endangered your own forces as well, Zhou Khan pointed out. Absolutely, Nguyen agreed cheerfully. We took heavy damage, lost 3 ships, but they lost 15 and their command structure was thrown into complete chaos. We had prepared for the debris field. They hadn't. Your victory required sacrificing your own vessels, Zhou Khan stated, his ember eyes fixed intently on Nguyen. The crews were evacuated to the assault vessels before impact, Nguyen clarified. Mostly. Mostly? Dithul echoed. 97% survival rate, Nguyen said with a slight shrug. Well within acceptable parameters for an operation of that scale. A heavy silence fell over the table. Even Jackson and Wilson seemed sobered by the reminder of the costs behind their tactical bravado. I begin to understand why your species has proven such formidable allies, Zhou Khan finally said. Your approach to warfare is unpredictable. That's putting it mildly, Dithul muttered. But these are all space-based engagements, Zhou Khan continued. My understanding is that humans developed their most distinctive tactics during terrestrial conflicts on your homeworld. The humans exchanged glances again. You've been studying our military history, Nguyen observed. It is prudent to understand one's allies, Zhou Khan replied smoothly. Your historical archives mention concepts that have no translation in any other known language. Trench warfare, mutually assured destruction, guerrilla tactics. Yeah, we've come up with some doozies, Wilson acknowledged. I'm particularly interested in a conflict your archives refer to as World War I, Zhou Khan continued. The tactical decisions described seem difficult to comprehend. Jackson let out a low whistle. Talk about humanity at its most stubbornly self-destructive. It wasn't our finest moment, Nguyen agreed grimly. Millions of lives lost to gain mere kilometers of territory. And yet, Zhou Khan pressed, your species continued fighting despite catastrophic losses that would have led any rational species to negotiate terms. That's kind of our thing, Wilson said with a humorless smile. We're really, really bad at giving up, even when we probably should. And this conflict, Zhou Khan continued, it introduced chemical warfare to your planet? Deliberately poisoning the atmosphere? Chlorine gas, Nguyen confirmed. Later mustard gas. Horrible ways to die. But that's not even the craziest part, Jackson added, leaning forward. The craziest part is what soldiers did in response. They surrendered? Katal ventured hopefully. Nope. They invented gas masks, kept fighting, and then came up with even worse gases that could penetrate the masks, Jackson said. It was like a demented arms race of who could make the air more unbreathable, while still expecting your soldiers to fight in these conditions, Zokhan stated. That's humanity for you, Wilson shrugged. We're remarkably adaptable, especially when it comes to finding new ways to kill each other. And yet your species survived long enough to develop interstellar travel, Dthul observed, despite these tendencies. Maybe because of them, Nguyen suggested quietly. Nothing drives innovation like warfare. Most of our greatest technological leaps came during or immediately after our most devastating conflicts. Zokhan was silent for a moment, the glow of his eyes dimming slightly as he processed this information. Your species concerns me, he finally said, his gravelly voice even lower than usual. Join the club, Jackson quipped, raising her glass in a mock toast. You misunderstand, Zokhan continued. My concern is not that humans are dangerous. All species capable of interstellar travel possess the capacity for destruction. My concern is that you appear fundamentally willing to destroy yourselves in order to achieve victory. Only when necessary, Nguyen clarified. And who determines necessity? Zokhan countered. In the conflicts you have described, the parameters for acceptable losses would be considered catastrophic failure by any other known species. Look, we're not actually suicidal, Wilson defended. We just have a different risk assessment matrix. That is precisely what troubles me, Zokhan rumbled. I have commanded forces in over 200 campaigns across 17 star systems. I have faced enemies that would consume entire worlds for sustenance. Yet in all those encounters, I have never encountered a species that would intentionally expose themselves to vacuum, poison their own atmosphere, or bombard planetary bodies they were actively orbiting. When you list them all together like that, it does sound pretty bad, Jackson admitted. But effective, Zokhan added, surprising them. Undeniably effective. A thoughtful silence fell over the table. You know, Nguyen finally said, there's an old human saying, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. A wise philosophy, Dthul nodded approvingly. We're really bad at following it, Wilson added with a grin. But the implication is interesting, Nguyen continued. The most fearsome opponent isn't necessarily the strongest or the most advanced. It's the one whose limits you cannot predict, the one who might do anything. Zokhan's ember eyes fixed on her, including self-destruction. Especially including self-destruction, Nguyen confirmed. The opponent who values victory over survival introduces a variable that makes conventional tactical assessment impossible. And this, Zokhan said slowly, is why the consortium forces surrendered to the United Earth government despite superior numbers and technology. Bingo, Jackson grinned. They realized we might actually be crazy enough to blow up Luna rather than let them establish a permanent presence in our solar system. Would you have? Katal asked, her bioluminescence pulsing with alarm. The humans exchanged glances again. No comment, Nguyen said finally, though the slight curve of her lips told a different story. I have studied the psychological profiles of 17 sentient species, Zokhan stated, and humans remain the only one I cannot fully comprehend. You are simultaneously the most empathetic species in known space and the most willing to inflict suffering upon yourselves and others. We contain multitudes, Wilson shrugged, quoting an ancient poet none of the aliens would recognize. Perhaps that is why your literature so often depicts you making first contact with alien species and immediately attempting to mate with them, Dthul observed dryly. You seek to understand that which is fundamentally different from yourselves. The humans at the table burst into laughter. I think you've been reading the wrong kind of human literature, Captain, Jackson managed between chuckles. I was assigned cultural orientation materials upon joining this vessel, Dthul replied, his mandibles clicking in confusion. The documents were quite explicit. Oh God, Wilson groaned. Someone gave him xenoerotica as a prank. Nguyen's expression darkened. I will be launching an investigation into this matter immediately. Please don't! Dthul pleaded, his exoskeleton flushing a deeper purple. The misunderstanding has already provided valuable insight into human humor, if nothing else. Speaking of humor, Katal interjected, perhaps sensing the conversation needed redirection. I have observed that humans often employ it during combat situations. Is this another psychological tactic? Gallows humor. Nguyen nodded. It's a coping mechanism. Making jokes in the face of death helps us deal with the stress, Wilson explained. Plus, it really seems to freak out the enemy when you're laughing while exchanging fire. This I have witnessed, Zokhan confirmed. During our joint operation against the Krell outpost on Tarath 4, I observed human soldiers engaging in what appeared to be competitive joke-telling while pinned down under heavy fire. That was Morgan's squad, Jackson recalled. They had this thing where they'd try to make each other laugh hard enough to miss a shot. Loser had to take the point position on the next patrol. Your species intentionally impairs its own combat effectiveness. As entertainment? D'Thul asked incredulously. Only when we're winning, Wilson clarified with a wink. You understand that none of this is reassuring to the rest of the galactic community, Zokan stated bluntly. Your species' unpredictability makes you valuable allies, but potentially catastrophic enemies. Hence why the Galactic Council was so eager to bring humanity into the fold after the Consortium War, Nguyen noted. Better to have us inside the tent pissing out, as another old human saying goes. Your translator appears to be malfunctioning, Katal observed, her bioluminescent patches flickering in confusion. No, that's actually the expression, Jackson confirmed with a grin. We're a crude bunch when you get down to it. Yet you compose poetry that has moved even Vardaxian empaths to tears, D'Thul observed. Your music has been adopted into religious ceremonies by species who cannot even hear the same frequency ranges as humans. Your philosophical treatises are studied throughout known space. Like the commander said, Wilson shrugged, we contain multitudes. This duality troubles me, Zokan admitted. In combat, one must know oneself and know one's enemy. Humans seem to defy such knowing, even among yourselves. That's not entirely fair, Nguyen countered. We understand our capabilities and limitations quite well. We simply refuse to accept the latter as definitive. Ah! Zokan's ember eyes brightened with sudden comprehension. You do not acknowledge limitations as fixed parameters. Exactly! Wilson exclaimed, pointing at the Tarkasian commander. Now you're getting it. This is why human soldiers have survived situations that should have been certain death. Zokan continued, his gravelly voice taking on a tone of grudging admiration. You do not accept impossibility as a constraint. We accept it as a challenge, Jackson corrected with a fierce grin. A dangerous philosophy, D'Thul observed. But an effective one, Katal added. The statistical improbability of human military successes against superior forces is well documented. Which brings me to a question I have long considered, Zokan said, his ember eyes fixing on each human in turn. What would your species do if faced with a truly unwinnable scenario? A situation where victory was mathematically impossible, where even survival was not an option. The humans fell silent, exchanging glances that seemed to carry entire conversations. We have a simulation for that, Nguyen finally said. In our military training academies, it's called the Kobayashi Maru scenario. What is the purpose of such a simulation? Zokan asked. To teach acceptance of defeat? Wilson actually snorted with laughter. God, no. It's to identify the cadets who refuse to accept the parameters of the test. I don't understand, D'Thul said, mandibles clicking in confusion. The test is designed to be unwinnable, Nguyen explained. The purpose isn't to see how the cadet handles defeat. It's to see which ones try to cheat. Cheat? Katal's bioluminescence pulsed in surprise. You deliberately seek those who would violate the rules? Not exactly, Jackson clarified. The test is looking for cadets who recognize that sometimes the rules themselves are the problem, the ones who change the conditions of the test itself. Because in a real no-win scenario, Wilson continued, that's exactly what we do. Change the conditions, rewrite the rules, flip the table. Even if such actions violated established protocols or direct orders, Zokan pressed. Especially if they violated protocols or orders, Nguyen confirmed. In a true extinction-level threat scenario, human military doctrine explicitly authorizes disregarding all standard constraints. The whatever-it-takes protocol, Jackson added. It's actually codified in our military law. The aliens stared at the humans with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. Your species has formalized its own unpredictability, Zokan finally said. You have institutionalized chaos. We prefer to think of it as adaptive response capability, Nguyen replied with a perfectly straight face. But surely there must be limits, D'Thul insisted. Parameters beyond which even humans would not venture. The humans exchanged those communicative glances again. There's another old Earth saying, Wilson offered. Necessity knows no law. But who defines necessity? Zokan countered. Who determines when such extraordinary measures are justified? Whoever's in command at the time, Nguyen stated simply. That's why command selection is such a rigorous process for us. We need people who can make those calls without hesitation, but also without resorting to them unnecessarily. A precarious balance, Zokan observed. Welcome to the human condition. Jackson raised her glass in another mock toast. A thoughtful silence descended on the table, each officer lost in their own reflections. It was Katal who finally broke it. I have noticed, she began hesitantly, her translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of her speech, that humans often employ artificial constraints in recreational activities. Your sports frequently prohibit the use of certain body parts or movements that would more efficiently achieve the objective. You mean like how in soccer you can't use your hands? Wilson asked. Precisely. Katal's bioluminescence brightened. You intentionally make tasks more difficult than necessary. For fun, Jackson confirmed with a grin. Because where's the challenge otherwise? Is this, Katal ventured, perhaps related to your military philosophy? This deliberate embrace of difficulty? The humans looked at each other, surprised. That's actually insightful, Nguyen admitted. I've never considered the connection before. You know, Wilson mused, that makes a lot of sense. We're constantly creating artificial challenges for ourselves. Running marathons, climbing mountains, holding our breath underwater. All things that have zero survival value in modern society. Yet you derive satisfaction from these unnecessary struggles, Zokan observed. More than satisfaction, Jackson corrected. We build our identities around them. This, Dethul declared, mandibles clicking rapidly, explains much about human behavior that has puzzled xenosociologists. You are not merely adaptable to adversity, you actively seek it out. And then we try to overcome it in the most complicated way possible. Wilson laughed, preferably while making jokes about it. A species that views adversity as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Zokan rumbled thoughtfully. Perhaps this is why the Krell horde avoided direct confrontation with human settlements, despite their numerical advantage. They knew we'd find some completely insane way to beat them, Jackson suggested. Or die trying, Nguyen added quietly, and probably take half the galaxy with us. Another silence fell over the table, heavier this time. I believe, Zokan finally said, that I now understand why the Galactic Council insists on human representation in all major military operations, despite your species' relative newcomer status in interstellar affairs. Oh? Nguyen raised an eyebrow. You are the contingency plan, Zokan stated simply. The option of last resort when conventional tactics fail. The unknown variable that even the most advanced predictive algorithms cannot account for. I'm not sure whether to be flattered or horrified, Wilson quipped. Both would be appropriate, Zokan assured him. It is simultaneously a recognition of your species' unique capabilities and an acknowledgement of how fundamentally unsettling those capabilities are to the rest of the galactic community. Great. Jackson raised her glass again. We're the galaxy's nuclear option. Cheers to that. As they drank, a ship-wide announcement came over the comm system. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to battle stations. The recreational lounge erupted into organized chaos as officers of a dozen species moved with practiced efficiency toward their assigned posts. Unidentified vessels at the outer system boundary, Nguyen reported after checking her comm unit. Initial readings suggest Krell signatures. The Horde hasn't ventured this far into Council space in decades, Dethul exclaimed, his mandibles clicking rapidly in alarm. They're getting bold again, Zokan rumbled, rising to his impressive full height. Or desperate. The officers hurried toward the bridge, their earlier camaraderie now transformed into professional focus. Commander Zokan, Wilson called as they moved through the corridors. Ever faced the Krell in direct combat? 3 times, the Tarkasian replied grimly. They are formidable opponents, hive-minded, tactically adaptive, and utterly without fear. Sounds like a challenge, Jackson grinned, that fierce light returning to her eyes. Lieutenant, Nguyen cautioned. Standard protocols apply until otherwise ordered. Of course, Commander. Jackson nodded, though the gleam remained. They reached the bridge to find it already a hub of activity. Captain Eleanor Frost, the Indomitable's commanding officer, stood at the central command station, reviewing tactical displays with her senior staff. Report, she ordered as they entered. 5 Krell vessels, Dreadnought class, the tactical officer responded. They've taken up position at the Lagrange point between the gas giant and its third moon. Weapons charged but not locked. They're hailing us. On screen, Frost commanded. The main view screen flickered, revealing the chitinous insectoid features of a Krell Queen commander. Her multiple eyes gleamed with cold intelligence, and the translucent exoskeleton of her elongated head pulsed with bioluminescent patterns too complex for non-Krell to interpret. "United Forces vessel," the Queen Commander chittered, the universal translator struggling to keep up with the rapid patterns of her speech. "You have entered contested space. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation." Captain Frost's expression remained impassive. "This is Captain Eleanor Frost of the UGMF Indomitable. You are in United Galactic Council territory, as established by the Treaty of Proxima. Your presence here violates 17 separate accords. Treaties made without the consent of the Horde are meaningless," the Queen Commander dismissed. "This system lies within our ancestral migration route. We claim it by right of historical usage." "A claim that was addressed and rejected by the Galactic Council 57 years ago," Frost countered smoothly. "I suggest you withdraw your vessels before this becomes a diplomatic incident." The Queen Commander's mandibles clicked rapidly in what the translator identified as derisive laughter. "Diplomacy is the refuge of the weak. We have monitored your vessel's activities. You are alone in this sector, conducting training exercises. Your combat readiness is suboptimal." Frost's expression didn't change, but Nguyen noticed the captain's fingers tapping a specific pattern on her command console, a coded signal to prepare for Protocol 47 Alpha. "Asymmetrical response to superior forces. I will give you one opportunity to reconsider," Frost stated calmly. "The Indomitable is a joint forces vessel with representatives from 17 species, including a full complement of human tactical specialists." A subtle change came over the Queen Commander's posture, a nearly imperceptible stiffening that wouldn't have been noticeable to anyone without specialized training in Krell behavioral patterns. "Humans," the Queen Commander chittered, the translator unable to fully convey the complex harmonics that accompanied the word. "You would invoke their presence as a deterrent?" "Merely stating a fact," Frost replied. "My executive officer, my tactical team, and nearly 30% of my crew are human. I thought you should be aware before you commit to your current course of action." The bridge crew maintained their professional demeanor, but Nguyen caught Wilson and Jackson exchanging subtle glances. They'd recognized the captain's strategy immediately. The Queen Commander was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes reflecting the lights of her vessel's command center. "The Horde remembers the Battle of Tau Ceti," she finally chittered. "We remember what your humans did when cornered." "Then you'll remember we prevailed despite being outnumbered 5-1, Frost replied, her tone conversational yet unmistakably carrying a note of warning. "Through methods no rational species would employ," the Queen Commander countered, a distinct harmonic of unease entering her voice. "Your destruction of the SETI mining stations collapsed the system's resource economy for 17 cycles. Along with 70% of the Horde fleet that had taken up defensive positions around those same stations," Frost agreed pleasantly. "An unfortunate but necessary collateral effect." Wilson leaned slightly toward Jackson, whispering, "We blew up a bunch of asteroid mines and caused a chain reaction of debris that shredded their fleet like confetti through a fan." Jackson grinned. "Before my time, but I read the case study at the Academy. Wasn't the blast radius like twice what the models predicted?" 3 times, Wilson corrected. "The engineer who calculated it got a commendation and mandatory psychiatric evaluation." The Queen Commander's antennae twitched rapidly, suggesting she was receiving information from elsewhere in her vessel. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted subtly. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding regarding territorial boundaries," she chittered. "The Horde acknowledges that further discussion may be warranted before asserting historical claims." Captain Frost allowed the faintest of smiles to touch her lips. "A reasonable approach, Queen Commander. I suggest you withdraw to the outer system boundary while your diplomatic corps contacts the Galactic Council to schedule these discussions." "This is acceptable," the Queen Commander conceded after another brief pause. "We will withdraw to demonstrate our commitment to peaceful resolution." "Excellent choice," Frost nodded. "Safe journey, Queen Commander. Indomitable out." The view screen went dark, and the tension on the bridge dissipated slightly as monitoring stations confirmed the Krell vessels powering down weapon systems and adjusting course away from the contested position. "Well played, Captain," Zokan rumbled, his ember eyes glowing with newfound respect. "You used the mere presence of humans as a psychological deterrent." "The reputation of your species precedes you," Frost replied, turning to the human officers present. "Sometimes the most effective weapon is the enemy's perception of what you might do, rather than what you actually intend to do," Dathul added, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Exactly," Frost confirmed. Stand down from battle stations. Maintain yellow alert status until the Krell vessels have left the system. As the bridge crew returned to their regular duties, Zhokan approached Nguyen, Wilson, and Jackson, his massive form moving with surprising grace. I have commanded warriors across 17 star systems, he said quietly. I have studied the military histories of countless species, but until today, I did not truly understand the unique position humans occupy in galactic security. Which is? Nguyen prompted. You are not merely soldiers, Zhokan stated. You are a concept, an uncertainty principle given form. The possibility that all rational calculation might suddenly become irrelevant. Wilson grinned. I'm putting that on my next performance review. I am serious, Lieutenant Commander, Zhokan insisted. The Krell Queen Commander did not retreat because of your ship's firepower, or the Council laws you cited. She retreated because humans were aboard, and the Horde's strategic algorithms cannot account for what humans might do when threatened. That's both flattering and slightly concerning, Nguyen observed. As it should be, Zhokan rumbled. Power that cannot be predicted cannot be countered. It is the ultimate strategic advantage. And all we had to do to earn it was spend a few thousand years finding increasingly creative ways to kill each other, Jackson quipped. A high price, Zhokan acknowledged solemnly, but perhaps one that has ultimately benefited the galaxy. Today, a potential conflict was averted without a single shot being fired. Because of stories. Because of your reputation. The power of a good war story, Wilson mused. Who would have thought? I would like to propose, Zhokan said formally, that when our shift concludes, we return to our previous discussion. I find I have many more questions about human military history. Looking for more deterrence tactics to add to your arsenal, Commander? Nguyen asked with a knowing smile. Perhaps, Zhokan admitted. Or perhaps I simply wish to understand the species that can make even a battle-hardened Tarkassian commander reconsider everything he thought he knew about warfare. Well, Jackson grinned, raising an imaginary glass in yet another toast. To creative problem-solving and the fear it instills in our enemies. And to peace through calculated insanity, Wilson added. To humanity, Zhokan rumbled, his ember eyes gleaming with a mixture of respect and lingering concern. The galaxy's ultimate contingency plan. As they returned to their stations, the Indomitable continued its patrol through the star system, its very presence and the humans aboard it, serving as a quiet reminder to the retreating Krell vessels that some lines were better left uncrossed, some boundaries better left unchallenged, and some species better left unprovoked, especially when those species might just be crazy enough to do the unthinkable. And call it Tuesday. The end. You're telling me humans do what to experience pleasure? Ambassador Zixcat's mandibles clicked in horrified fascination, all four eyes blinking asynchronously. They consume fermented plant and fruit matter that poisons their nervous systems, temporarily impairs cognitive function, and causes cellular damage, Science Officer Vreen said, adjusting her translucent membrane to better display the data. Then they gather in loud chambers to move rhythmically, while ingesting more of these toxins until their bodies purge the excess through various orifices. And they call this partying? Zixcat's voice modulator couldn't quite capture the incredulity. That is correct, Ambassador. Vreen's appendages twitched slightly, the Moxillian equivalent of a shrug. They actually plan these poisoning sessions in advance. They look forward to them. The two aliens stood in the observation deck of the galactic diplomatic vessel, Harmonious Exchange, currently in stable orbit around Earth. The blue-green planet rotated below them, innocent-looking from space. No one would suspect it harbored a species that voluntarily damaged its own biology for recreation. Zixcat chittered softly. I've studied 17 sentient species across the galactic arm, and none, are as perplexing as humans. Did you know they deliberately deprive themselves of restoration cycles? Sleep, Ambassador. They call it sleep. Yes, that. They require approximately 8 Earth hours of unconsciousness to maintain neural function, yet routinely choose to postpone it to engage in, what was it called, binge-watching? The consecutive viewing of fictional narratives for extended periods, Vreen confirmed, often while consuming nutrient-poor sustenance engineered specifically to be addictive. A third voice joined their conversation, smooth and deliberate. What's even more fascinating is that they don't consider any of this abnormal. Both aliens turned to face Fleet Commander Oryx, who had silently glided into the observation deck on his gravity pads. The towering Valdorian's crystalline exoskeleton reflected the starlight, his thought patterns pulsing visibly through translucent neural pathways. "Commander," they acknowledged in unison. "My apologies for the interruption. I couldn't help but overhear your discussion about our fascinating neighbors." Oryx gestured towards Earth with one elegant appendage. "I've been studying human cultural transmissions for nearly a solar cycle. The most disturbing aspect isn't what they do. It's their complete conviction that they represent biological normalcy." "Elaborate, please," Zixcat requested, always eager for new insights about potential diplomatic partners. "They've constructed their entire society around their peculiar limitations. Instead of recognizing their bizarre need for regular unconsciousness as a disadvantage, they've romanticized it. They have special chambers for it, special garments, and complex rituals before and after. When they can't achieve this state, they consume more chemicals to force it." Vreen's data membrane flickered with new information. "Their biological contradictions are innumerable. Their primary mode of reproduction is intrinsically pleasurable, yet they've developed elaborate social taboos around it. They require social connection for optimal function, but frequently isolate themselves. They recognize certain behavioral patterns as harmful, yet deliberately engage in them. And the most bewildering aspect," Oryx continued, "is that they believe other species would be constructed similarly. Their early speculative fiction consistently portrayed extraterrestrial life with the same fundamental drives and limitations. Even now, as they stand on the threshold of galactic society, many of them expect us to comprehend concepts like weekend or happy hour." Zixcat's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Perhaps that's why the Council has delayed full integration. Imagine a human delegate suggesting the hive mind collective of Betelgeuse needs a vacation, or asking a Kronaki if they've tried yoga." The three aliens shared a moment of multi-species mirth, each expressing humor according to their biological paradigm. Zixcat's rapid mandible clicks, Vreen's color fluctuations, and Oryx's harmonic resonance. "Still," Oryx mused as their amusement subsided, "there's something admirable in their adaptability. They've taken their flaws and not merely compensated, but somehow transmuted them into cultural features. Perhaps that's what makes them potentially valuable to the galactic community. That, and their inexplicable ability to survive things that would annihilate most sentient species," Vreen added. "You're referring to their environmental resilience?" Zixcat inquired. "Partially. Humans can survive in temperature ranges that would kill a Moxillian instantly. They can lose entire limbs and continue functioning. They routinely recover from massive trauma that would terminate most sentient beings, and their psychological durability is equally remarkable. They can maintain functionality despite ongoing grief, trauma, or existential awareness." Oryx made a gesture of scholarly acknowledgement. "The latest theory from the Xenobiological Institute suggests humans evolved on a planet so relentlessly hostile that only a species with extreme redundancies and repair capabilities could achieve dominance. Earth is, by galactic standards, a death world." "A death world?" Zixcat's mandibles froze mid-click. "But it seems so blue and wet." "The wetness is precisely part of the problem," Vreen explained. "Almost every surface on Earth harbors microscopic organisms that would be classified as biological weapons on any civilized planet. Humans have evolved alongside these pathogens, developing elaborate internal defense systems. Their bodies are essentially walking battle zones. And the gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, has produced beings with dense musculature and robust skeletal structures that can exert tremendous physical force. Not to mention," Oryx added, "they evolved as persistence predators who can literally chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Their thermoregulatory capabilities alone would qualify them as bioengineered super soldiers in most galactic jurisdictions." The observation deck fell silent as they contemplated this information, the blue-green death world rotating serenely below. "And now," Zixcat finally said, "we're considering inviting these nightmare creatures into the galactic community. Beings who poison themselves for fun, deliberately avoid necessary unconsciousness, and can continue fighting after sustaining injuries that would kill any of us. The preliminary diplomatic assessment does present certain challenges," Oryx admitted. "I suggest," Vreen offered, "that we begin with a single human representative, someone who can help us understand their peculiarities before we attempt broader engagement." "An excellent proposal," Zixcat agreed. But who, and how do we select them without causing interspecies incident? I believe, Oryx said, I may have a candidate. Her name is Dr. Andrea Thompson. She's a xenoanthropologist who has published extensively on the challenges of interspecies communication. More importantly, she appears to possess unusually high self-awareness regarding human peculiarities. Very well, Zixcat decided. Make the necessary arrangements, but maintain orbit at a safe distance, and triple the ship's decontamination protocols. I've heard humans constantly shed their external layer and expel microscopic droplets when they communicate verbally. They do, Vreen confirmed grimly. They call it skin cells and saliva. They consider this normal. Dr. Andrea Thompson was having an entirely normal day when the aliens abducted her. Well, abducted wasn't quite the right word. The formal invitation had arrived via a shimmering holographic projection that materialized over her morning coffee, causing her to spill it all over her half-graded undergraduate papers. After the initial shock and frantic blotting of caffeine from student essays, she'd read the invitation with growing excitement. By afternoon, she'd packed a bag, explained to her department chair that she was taking an emergency sabbatical for reasons that would become clear to everyone very soon, and stood in her backyard awaiting molecular transference. Now standing in what appeared to be a pristine white reception chamber aboard an alien vessel, Andrea was attempting to make a good first impression on humanity's behalf. This was slightly complicated by the fact that she'd just vomited into an elegant crystalline container that might have been a priceless alien artifact, rather than a conveniently placed sick bag. I am so sorry, she managed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Molecular transference is, new to us. The three aliens observing her maintained a diplomatic distance. The one with mandibles, which seemed to be moving in patterns that might indicate speech, stepped forward slightly. A moment later, Andrea's brain caught up with the fact that she was hearing words in perfect English. Perfectly normal reaction to first-time molecular transference, Dr. Thompson. Our apologies for the discomfort. The translational implant we've provided should be functioning now. Can you understand me? Andrea blinked. Yes, perfectly. And there was an implant? Never mind. Yes, I understand you. Excellent. I am Ambassador Zixcat of the Galactic Coalition. The mandible-clicking alien gestured to the gelatinous translucent being beside it. This is Science Officer Vreen of the Moxillian Biological Institute. Then, indicating the tall, crystalline figure, and Fleet Commander Oryx of the Valdorian Defense Consortium. Andrea straightened her posture, trying to look as professionally composed as one could after throwing up in front of representatives of advanced alien civilizations. It's an honor to meet you all. I'm Dr. Andrea Thompson, xenoanthropologist from Earth. I guess I'm representing humanity, though I should mention no one officially appointed me. And there might be some questions about jurisdiction and authority when I get back, assuming I do get back, which I'm hoping will happen eventually because I have a cat and... She stopped abruptly. Sorry, I'm rambling. First contact nerves. Zixcat's mandibles moved in what might have been a reassuring pattern. Your concerns are noted, Dr. Thompson. We assure you this is merely a preliminary cultural exchange. You will be returned to your original location with no perceptible time loss. As for your status as representative, our scans indicated you were uniquely qualified to help us understand certain human peculiarities. Peculiarities? Andrea repeated, intrigued despite her lingering nausea. Perhaps distinctive characteristics would be a more diplomatic phrasing, Oryx suggested, his voice resonating with harmonics that made Andrea's sternum vibrate slightly. We have been observing Earth for some time, Vreen explained, her translucent body rippling with patterns of light that seemed to accompany her speech. Humanity presents certain challenges for integration into the galactic community. We hoped you might provide context for behaviors our xenoanthropologists find puzzling. Oh, Andrea couldn't help but smile. You want me to explain why humans are weird? The three aliens exchanged glances that transcended species. A universal look of diplomatic personnel who've heard something awkwardly direct. We would never characterize another species as weird, Dr. Thompson, Zixcat clarified. Every sentient species has evolved according to its unique environmental pressures and... It's okay, Andrea interrupted. I get it. Humans are objectively bizarre by galactic standards, right? That's actually my academic specialty. Contextualizing human behavior for potential extraterrestrial contact. My doctoral thesis was titled, The Anthropocentric Fallacy, Preparing for Non-Human Normative Standards in Interspecies Communication. The aliens visibly relaxed, each in their distinctive physiological way. Precisely why you were selected, Oryx confirmed. Would you be willing to discuss some specific questions about human behavior? We've prepared comfortable accommodations for you aboard the Harmonious Exchange. Absolutely, Andrea agreed enthusiastically. Though I should mention I'll need to eat and sleep regularly. And use a bathroom. We humans have high-maintenance biology. All arrangements have been made for your biological requirements, Vreen assured her, including special filtering systems for the various particles and gases you continuously emit. That's thoughtful. Andrea decided not to dwell on what those filters might be collecting. Shall we begin? The accommodations were surprisingly comfortable, even by human standards. Andrea sat in what appeared to be a specially designed chair that adjusted to her body's pressure points. Across from her, the three aliens had arranged themselves in formation that she guessed represented some sort of formal diplomatic configuration. So, she began, what would you like to know about humans first? Vkr'lak consulted a shimmering display. Our most pressing question concerns human recreational activities. Specifically, why do humans deliberately consume neurotoxins that impair cognitive function and cause cellular damage? Andrea laughed. You mean alcohol? Yeah, that's a fair question. The simple answer is it feels good in the short term, and humans are remarkably willing to trade long-term health for immediate pleasure. But the substance triggers your species' poison response, Vreen noted. Your bodies actively attempt to eliminate it. You experience coordination loss, judgment impairment, memory disruption, and then suffering afterward. The hangover, yes. Look, I'm not saying it's logical, but alcohol reduces inhibitions and anxiety temporarily. Humans are constantly worried about past mistakes and future problems. It's exhausting. Alcohol provides a brief escape from that awareness. Your species deliberately impairs its primary evolutionary advantage, advanced cognition, for temporary emotional relief? Oryx's crystalline structure pulsed with what might have been confusion. When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous, Andrea admitted. But humans rarely make decisions based on pure logic. We're emotional creatures. We do lots of things that don't make objective sense. Like voluntarily delaying unconsciousness cycles despite knowing it impairs function, Vkr'lak suggested. Sleep, yes. We call that revenge bedtime procrastination these days. We delay sleep because it's the only time some people feel they have control over their lives. During work hours and family obligations, time belongs to others. Late at night, time finally belongs to us. Even though this behavior pattern causes harm, Vreen's body rippled with what Andrea interpreted as incredulity. Especially because it causes harm, Andrea clarified. There's a certain satisfaction in self-sabotage when you feel your life is overly controlled. It's like a tiny rebellion against biological necessity. The aliens were silent for a moment, possibly communicating in frequencies Andrea couldn't perceive. What about human consumption of non-nutritive food substances engineered to trigger pleasure responses? Oryx finally asked. Our scans show many humans regularly ingest materials with no biological value. Junk food, sure. Same principle as alcohol, really. Short-term pleasure over long-term benefit. Plus, our bodies evolved during times of scarcity, so we're programmed to crave calorie-dense foods. Our environment changed faster than our biology could adapt. But your medical knowledge clearly identifies these substances as harmful, Vkr'lak pressed. Yet you continue to produce and consume them. Andrea sighed. Welcome to the human condition, Ambassador. We're walking contradictions. We know what's good for us, and frequently choose otherwise. We call it free will, and consider it our greatest feature, even when it leads to poor outcomes. Fascinating. Vreen's translucent form pulsed with light patterns. And is this contradiction pattern consistent across other behaviors? Oh, absolutely. We create beautiful art about preserving nature while simultaneously destroying it. We develop medical advances that extend life, then spend that extended life doing things that shorten it. We crave both novelty and stability, freedom and security, social connection and solitude. How do you maintain psychological coherence with such opposing drives? Oryx wondered. Andrea laughed. Bold of you to assume we do. We manage these contradictions through a complex system we call not thinking about it too much. And when that fails, we have elaborate distractions available. Hence, alcohol, social media, and reality television. The aliens exchanged another round of those universal, this is concerning glances. But surely this cognitive dissonance causes distress. Zixcat's mandibles clicked rapidly. Constant low-grade existential distress is basically the default human condition, Andrea confirmed cheerfully. We call it the human experience and write poetry about it. Some of our greatest art comes from trying to make sense of our contradictory nature. And you consider this normal? Vreen's membrane flickered with what might have been concern. That's the thing, Andrea leaned forward. Humans think we're the baseline for normal. Our entire perspective is shaped by our specific evolutionary history, but we assume our experience is universal. It's what I study, the anthropocentric fallacy. We imagine aliens either as improved humans or flawed humans, rarely as beings with entirely different foundational experiences. This may present challenges for integration, Oryx observed. Oh, without question, Andrea agreed. Humans will expect aliens to understand concepts like weekend or comfort food or guilty pleasure. We'll make jokes that rely on shared cultural context. We'll assume you experience emotions the way we do. It'll be a mess. Yet you seem remarkably aware of these limitations, Zixcat noted. Professional training. I've spent my career trying to step outside the human perspective. Most people don't think about these things. This brings us to another question, Vreen interjected. Our scans indicate humans possess remarkable physical resilience compared to most sentient species. You can survive massive trauma, regenerate damaged tissue, and function in environmental conditions that would be fatal to most galactic citizens. Are humans aware of their unusual durability? Andrea blinked. Really? We're considered durable? That's surprising. We feel pretty fragile from our perspective. Your species evolved on what would be classified as a death world by galactic standards, Oryx explained. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, abundant pathogens, and dangerous fauna. The average human could accidentally kill many species with a friendly gesture. Huh. Andrea sat back, processing this information. So that's why this room seems slightly off. Is the gravity adjusted? To 70% of Earth normal, Vreen confirmed. Standard diplomatic accommodation for Death World species. And there are extensive decontamination protocols in place, Zixcat added. Your microbiome alone would be considered a biological weapon on most civilized planets. Well, that's terrifying, Andrea said. I had no idea we were the scary ones. This is precisely why your perspective is valuable, Oryx said. Humans not only normalize their extraordinary traits, but are often unaware of them. You experience pain, injury, and illness, so you perceive yourselves as vulnerable, never realizing that your ability to survive these conditions is itself exceptional. Like how humans can just keep going after breaking bones, Vreen added, her translucent form shimmering with what might have been academic interest. Or how you routinely survive significant blood loss, or continue functioning despite massive sleep deprivation. Or your psychological resilience, Zixcat noted. Humans experience grief, trauma, existential awareness, and yet continue daily functions. Many species would enter terminal shutdown under similar psychological conditions. Andrea frowned thoughtfully. I never considered our ability to compartmentalize suffering as unusual. We just call it coping, or sometimes unhealthy repression. The truly remarkable aspect, Oryx continued, is that humans not only survive, but often find meaning in suffering. You create philosophical frameworks, art, and social bonds specifically through shared hardship. That's actually a good point, Andrea acknowledged. Some of our most profound connections come from getting through difficult experiences together. We have a saying, shared joy is double joy. Shared sorrow is half sorrow. And this is precisely what the Galactic Coalition finds both promising and concerning about potential human integration, Zixcat explained. Your species possesses remarkable adaptability and resilience, but also unpredictable behavioral patterns and a troubling tendency to normalize extreme conditions. You're worried we'll be the galactic equivalent of that friend who says it's just a scratch when they clearly need medical attention, Andrea suggested. The three aliens stared at her, then at each other. That is a surprisingly apt analogy, Oryx finally said. The Coalition is concerned humans might volunteer for dangerous situations without fully comprehending the risks, misunderstand basic safety protocols due to your unusual tolerances, or inadvertently endanger more fragile species. In other words, Andrea summarized, you're worried we're going to be the galactic bull in the china shop. We're not familiar with that idiom, Vreen noted. But if it suggests a physically resilient species inadvertently causing damage in an environment designed for more delicate beings, then yes. Andrea nodded thoughtfully. It's a valid concern. Humans tend to assume everyone experiences reality the way we do. We'll need extensive cultural training before wider contact. Precisely our conclusion, Zixcat agreed. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. The Coalition proposes establishing a cultural exchange program, with you as the initial human liaison. Your awareness of human peculiarities makes you ideally suited to develop protocols for broader contact. Andrea felt a surge of excitement followed by immediate doubt. I'm flattered, but I'm just an academic. Shouldn't this involve governments, international organizations? Eventually, yes, Oryx confirmed. But initial contact through existing power structures often leads to militarization or resource competition. The Coalition prefers to establish cultural understanding first, through individuals who can appreciate the complexity of interspecies relations. This would be a temporary position, Zixcat added. You would divide time between Earth and Coalition diplomatic vessels, helping develop communication protocols and cultural guidelines. Once a framework is established, broader contact would begin. Andrea ran a hand through her hair, a human gesture of contemplation the aliens watched with fascination. So I'd be like the human cultural translator, helping both sides understand each other's weirdness? We would characterize it as facilitating mutual comprehension of species-specific normative frameworks, Vreen offered. Right, explaining each side's weirdness, Andrea repeated with a smile. Honestly, it sounds like my dream job, but I have questions about practical matters. A sudden alarm interrupted her, accompanied by flashing lights and a voice speaking in a language her translator implant didn't process. The three aliens immediately straightened, their attention diverted to communication devices Andrea hadn't noticed before. Is everything okay? She asked. Zixcat's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Andrea was beginning to recognize as their version of concern. There appears to be a situation developing on Earth. A human military organization has detected our vessel despite our cloaking technology. They've launched primitive projectile weapons, Oryx added, his crystalline form pulsing with accelerated patterns. Easily deflected, but concerning nonetheless. Let me guess, Andrea said with a grimace. They didn't try communication first? Just went straight to missiles? That is correct, Vreen confirmed. Is this typical human behavior when encountering unknown entities? Andrea sighed deeply. Unfortunately, yes. We tend to shoot first and ask questions later. It's another one of our less charming traits. The missiles pose no threat to this vessel, Oryx assured her. But the diplomatic implications are problematic. I can help, Andrea offered quickly. Let me speak to them. Explain that this is a peaceful contact. The aliens hesitated, exchanging complex nonverbal signals. It would be unprecedented, Zixcat finally said. But perhaps appropriate given the circumstances. Commander? Oryx's crystalline structure hummed with what might have been deliberation. Very well. We will establish communication with the human military facility and allow Dr. Thompson to address them. 30 minutes later, Andrea stood in what appeared to be the ship's communication center, facing a large screen displaying the stern faces of several military officers. Behind them, a busy command center buzzed with activity. The insignia on their uniforms identified them as belonging to the United Earth Defense Coalition, a multinational military organization formed specifically to address potential extraterrestrial threats. Let me get this straight, Dr. Thompson, General Maxwell said, his bushy eyebrows furrowed in suspicion. You're telling me you were personally selected by these aliens for a cultural exchange program, without any government authorization or oversight? That's correct, General, Andrea replied, trying to project calm professionalism despite the absurdity of the situation. The Galactic Coalition specifically wanted to avoid initial contact through military or governmental channels to prevent exactly this kind of misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Colonel Lee interjected. An unidentified vessel appears in Earth orbit without warning or permission. That's not a misunderstanding. It's a potential invasion scenario. If they wanted to invade, Colonel, they wouldn't have bothered with the cultural consultant, Andrea pointed out. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Those missiles you launched, they didn't even register as a threat. They're not here to conquer Earth. They're here to figure out if we're safe to talk to. Safe to talk to? General Maxwell repeated incredulously. Yes, General. From their perspective, humans are unpredictable death-world organisms with concerning behavioral patterns and a tendency to resort to violence, Andrea explained, not bothering to hide her frustration. Your missile launch rather proved their point. The military personnel exchanged glances. Death-world organisms? Colonel Lee asked, a hint of pride creeping into her voice despite her suspicion. Earth is classified as an extreme environment by galactic standards, Andrea explained. Humans evolved to withstand conditions that would kill most sentient species. We're basically space orcs. This revelation caused a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Andrea could practically see the military minds processing this information, recalculating humanity's position in a much larger context. Dr. Thompson, a new voice spoke. A woman in a civilian suit stepped into frame. Dr. Eleanor Murray, scientific advisor to the UEDC. You're a xenoanthropologist, correct? Your work focuses on preparing for non-human normative standards in interspecies communication? Andrea nodded, relieved to see a familiar academic face. Yes, Dr. Murray. In fact, that's exactly why I was chosen. The Galactic Coalition needed someone who understands human behavior from an objective standpoint, someone who can explain why we do the strange things we do. And what have you told them about us so far? General Maxwell asked, still suspicious. The truth, General. That we're contradictory, resilient, adaptable, and frequently irrational. That we have potential as galactic citizens but need guidance to avoid accidentally causing interspecies incidents. You told alien visitors that humans are irrational? Colonel Lee's tone was icy. I told them we're complex, Andrea corrected. That our seemingly illogical behaviors make sense within our evolutionary and cultural context. My job isn't to make humans look perfect. It's to help both sides understand each other. Dr. Murray leaned forward. And what do these aliens want from Earth? Resources? Territory? Technology exchange? Cultural exchange initially, Andrea explained. The Galactic Coalition includes thousands of sentient species, each with unique perspectives and capabilities. They're proposing a gradual integration process, beginning with cultural and scientific dialogue before any formal political relationship. And they abducted you to facilitate this? General Maxwell's skepticism remained evident. They invited me, Andrea corrected firmly. I accepted voluntarily, and I'm not the only one. They're identifying potential liaisons from various fields. Scientists, artists, philosophers, people who can bridge the gap between human and non-human perspectives. A tense silence followed as the military personnel conferred among themselves. We'll need to consult with our respective governments, General Maxwell finally said. This goes beyond military jurisdiction. In the meantime, we request that the alien vessel maintain its current position and make no attempt to approach Earth or deploy additional visitors. Ambassador Zixcat, who had been silently observing the exchange, stepped forward. The harmonious exchange will comply with your request, General. We seek only peaceful interaction with your species. And Dr. Thompson? Dr. Murray asked. Will she be returned? I've agreed to remain aboard temporarily, Andrea interjected before the aliens could respond. As a voluntary cultural consultant, I believe I can help establish protocols for wider contact. That's not your decision to make, Colonel Lee pointed out. You don't speak for Earth. Neither do you, Andrea countered. But someone needs to start the conversation. Would you prefer it be military personnel who immediately launch missiles at potential allies? General Maxwell's expression tightened, but Dr. Murray intervened before he could respond. Dr. Thompson makes a valid point, she said diplomatically. Perhaps a compromise. Dr. Thompson continues her cultural consultation role, but with regular reports to an international scientific committee. No formal agreements until proper diplomatic channels are established. Ambassador Zixcat's mandibles clicked in what Andrea now recognized as their version of agreement. This arrangement is acceptable to the Coalition. We seek understanding, not advantage. After further discussion and several more layers of bureaucratic requirements, the communication ended with a tentative agreement. Andrea would remain aboard the Harmonious Exchange as an unofficial cultural consultant, with daily reports to Earth. The ship would maintain its position in high orbit, and no additional humans would be brought aboard without prior notification. As the screen went dark, Andrea exhaled slowly. Well, that went about as well as could be expected. Sorry about the missiles. A predictable response given our data on human threat assessment patterns, Oryx said, his crystalline form resonating with what might have been amusement. In fact, Science Officer Vreen had calculated a 78.3% probability of immediate military response. I'd have put it higher, Andrea admitted. We have a long history of shooting at things we don't understand. Which brings us back to our earlier discussion, Zixcat said. Humans possess remarkable capabilities and potential, but certain behavioral patterns present integration challenges. Andrea nodded thoughtfully. You know what's ironic? Humans are simultaneously convinced we're the center of the universe and worried we're cosmically insignificant. We're terrified of being alone in the universe, yet our first response to potential company is to try to blow it up. We're walking contradictions. Yet these contradictions have produced remarkable achievements, Vreen observed. Your art, philosophy, scientific inquiry, all shaped by the tension between opposing drives. Perhaps, Oryx suggested, the very traits that make humans challenging as galactic citizens also make them valuable. Your species sees possibilities where others see only established patterns. That's generous, Andrea said with a small smile. But you might be onto something. Humans are really good at thinking outside the box. Partly because we often don't realize there is a box. Precisely why controlled integration is preferable to isolation, Zixcat concluded. With proper guidance, human unpredictability could benefit the galactic community rather than disrupt it. Andrea took a deep breath, suddenly aware of the historic role she'd accidentally stumbled into. Well then, I guess we should get started on those integration protocols. But first, I need to ask, is there coffee on this ship? Because explaining humanity is going to require caffeine, lots of it. The aliens exchanged confused glances. The stimulant beverage derived from roasted plant seeds? Vreen clarified. The one humans consume despite its bitter taste and potential to cause nervousness, insomnia, and digestive distress? That's the one, Andrea confirmed cheerfully. We can synthesize it, Oryx offered hesitantly, though our records indicate it's classified as a mild neurotoxin. Andrea laughed. Welcome to Lesson 1 in Human Integration. We have a saying. One person's neurotoxin is another person's breakfast essential. Actually, we don't say that, but we absolutely should. As the aliens led her toward what she hoped was a food synthesis area, Andrea couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of the situation. Humanity's first official extraterrestrial cultural consultant, attempting to explain the inexplicable quirks of human behavior to bewildered aliens. The scariest part about humans? They think they're the normal ones. And maybe, just maybe, that was also their greatest strength. 6 months later, Andrea stood in the observation deck of the Harmonious Exchange, watching Earth rotate serenely below. Beside her, Ambassador Zixcat and Commander Oryx observed her with what she'd learned to recognize as interspecies concern. You appear contemplative, Dr. Thompson, Zixcat noted. Is something troubling you? Andrea smiled. Just thinking about how much has changed. 6 months ago, humans thought we were alone in the universe. Now we're preparing for official integration into a galactic community. It's a lot to process. The transition has progressed more smoothly than our preliminary models projected, Oryx commented, his crystalline structure pulsing with calm patterns. Your cultural translation protocols have reduced potential conflicts by approximately 64%. Turns out humans are pretty adaptable when given the chance, Andrea said. Though I'm still getting complaints about the galactic standard work schedule. Humans are very attached to their weekends. An arbitrary temporal designation with no astronomical significance. Zixcat's mandibles clicked in what Andrea now knew was mild frustration. Yet you insist it's essential for human psychological well-being. Trust me on this one, Andrea laughed. Try to take away weekends and you'll see how quickly humans can organize a revolution. Their conversation was interrupted as Science Officer Vreen glided into the observation deck, her translucent form pulsing with excitement patterns. The Cultural Exchange Committee has approved the next phase, she announced. 50 additional human liaisons will join the program next month, and the Coalition Council has formally recognized Earth as a probationary member world. Probationary? Andrea raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, they're still concerned about our tendency to poison ourselves for fun and challenge each other to dangerous stunts for social media validation? Among other behavioral anomalies, Vreen confirmed, her membrane rippling with what Andrea had come to recognize as diplomatic tact. However, the Council was particularly impressed by humanity's adaptability and problem-solving capabilities. Your species' cognitive flexibility is considered an asset, despite your biological eccentricities. We'll take it, Andrea said with a smile. From terrifying death world organisms to probationary members in 6 months is pretty good progress. There is one additional matter, Oryx added, his crystalline form resonating with formal tones. The Galactic Educational Directorate has requested your assistance with a new initiative. Oh? Andrea's curiosity was piqued. They wish to establish an academic discipline studying human behavioral patterns, Zixcat explained. a field they're tentatively calling terranomalies, the study of why humans do the strange things they do. Andrea burst into laughter. They want to create an entire academic field dedicated to human weirdness? That's actually perfect. You're not offended? Vreen's translucent form rippled with surprise. Not at all. Humans love being studied almost as much as we love studying others. We're curious narcissists at heart. Andrea turned back to the viewport, watching her small blue planet against the vast backdrop of stars. Besides, it makes sense. If we're going to join the galactic community, everyone needs to understand why we insist on celebrating birthdays, or why we say bless you when someone expels air at high velocity through their nasal passages. The coalition representatives found your explanation of sarcasm particularly troubling, Oryx noted, with what might have been amusement. The concept of saying the opposite of what one means for humorous effect has caused several diplomatic misunderstandings. Wait until they discover puns, Andrea muttered. What was that? Zixcat's mandibles clicked curiously. Nothing important, Andrea said quickly. Some human concepts are best introduced gradually. As the four of them stood watching Earth rotate below, Andrea felt a profound sense of purpose. Humanity was taking its first steps into a much larger universe, a universe where they were the weird ones, the unpredictable variable, the fascinating anomaly. And somehow that felt exactly right. Because the scariest part about humans wasn't their death world biology or their contradictory behaviors. It wasn't even their tendency to consume neurotoxins for fun or deliberately deprive themselves of necessary unconsciousness. No, the scariest part about humans was that despite all evidence to the contrary, they remained absolutely convinced they were the normal ones. And perhaps that unshakable self-assurance, that cosmic audacity, was exactly what the galaxy needed. The end.